But when you read the words of Jesus, and you read what he says his followers will experience, you can't help to wonder what on earth has happened. Martyrs complex, some of you have ever heard that, but it's the idea that like we intentionally subject ourselves to suffering and rejection, kind of like we want to be a martyr, if that makes sense. We're not chasing after martyrs complex. It's not that we want to suffer. It's not that we want to be rejected. It's not that we want to be mocked. Follow him. You're going to die to yourself, and you're going to pick up a cross, and you too are going to suffer. And so in American Christianity, where we experience little suffering or little loss whatsoever, it really makes me wonder, are we followers of... I don't know if you can buy into the weight of that, but Jesus seems pretty clear with his words that people who are living for him are going to suffer like him. And I don't think we'd be wrong to say if we're not suffering in any way, we're living like him. Are we followers of Jesus at all? Are we safe? Are we safe? Are we setting our interest on our interest or on God's interest? Are we denying ourselves? Are we giving our life to save it? Do we have the whole world in our hands, but have we forfeited our soul? Are we ashamed of Jesus Christ? Verse 38. Are we ashamed of Jesus? I don't want to dwell on that too incredibly much is done for us. That is where the rejection comes. I don't know if you remember earlier in the Gospels, I can't tell you exactly where in the Gospel of Mark, but earlier in the Gospel, Mark says to his disciples, he says, don't take 2 cloaks, just take 1 robe with you. Take 1 coat. He says, don't take any of that kind of stuff. You're going to go, you're going to share the gospel, and people are going to reject you. You will suffer these sorts of things. If you are sharing the good news of the gospel, people will reject you. If you are proclaiming the name of Jesus Christ to lost people, people will reject you. You'll be mocked. In this text, ask for much from his followers. God asked for much. It's been said, and possibly even in this church, but nonetheless we've spoken of the vastness of space. You may remember that. We had a little plate a couple of years ago, had the Vacation Bible School thing. We've spoken of the vastness of space. It's said, I'll read this to you. It said the distance between our planet and the sun is 92 million miles. And if that 92 million miles was the thickness of a piece of paper, if that 92 million galaxy, the diameter of the Milky Way would be a stack of papers 310 miles high. Can you picture that? Say it again. If you took the distance between the earth and the sun and you said that's a piece of paper, 92 million miles, then the distance, the miles, can you picture how big that is? Crazy big. And our galaxy is less than a speck of dust in the part of the universe that we can see. And they say that the part of the universe might just be a speck of dust compared to all the other universe. And who holds all this together with the word of his power. Can you picture this? If Jesus is the one who holds this all together, how do you hear these words when he speaks? How do you hear these words? He says, if you want to come after me, you must deny yourself. Profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul. Whoever's ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, how do you hear these words? With what reverence and awe do we heed his commands? What kind of person you ask into your life to be your personal assistant? This is not a personal assistant. This God is crazy big, and he is very demanding. He asks of us. He demands of us. If you wish to, and so what if he's calling us to do something different, something difficult, something hard? What if Jesus is actually calling us to go against the grain of who I am? Does that make sense? What if Jesus is calling us to do something in this text that we just don't feel comfortable doing? I think that's exactly what he's doing. He's speaking to a group of people, a crowd of people, not just his disciples, not just Peter. He's speaking to everyone. And he says, if you want to follow me, this is what following me looks like. This is it. And he's a big God. He holds creation. In verse 38 of Mark chapter 8, verse 38, the second part there, we're told that the Son of Man will come in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. This big God will come in the glory of his Father. I don't know if you can picture what it will be like to see Jesus in his glory, or see Jesus in the glory of the Father. It'll be the opposite of like the mother at the mall that does the countdown thing. Like, does that make 1.5? 1.25? Like, or they count up. You get the point, right? Can you picture Jesus returning in his glory? It will be totally different than that. Totally different than that. You remember the story of Moses, where Moses says, Lord, show me your glory and live. You can't see my glory and live. You can't see me and live. So he says, go and hide in the rock. And he says, and I'll put my hand over you, and I will pass by you. And then you can peek out and see my backside. But if you want to see me in my full glory, you will not. And Jesus, we're told in verse 38 of Mark chapter 8, that he will come in the glory of his Father with his holy angels. He will come in the glory of his Father with his angels surrounding him. This is the God who said, Jesus, but who are unable to kill the soul, but rather fear him who's able to destroy both soul and body in hell. So the Lord speaks to Peter. He speaks to the disciples. He speaks to the whole crowd, and he tries to make this crazy, any interest in following him, to know exactly what he's asking. There's no bait and switch here with Jesus. There's no bait and switch. There's no false advertising. I've got this mental list of false advertising in my mind, like where I've been burnt before. I remember there was a place in Tulsa, gyros, however you say it, the Greek food. I don't know if you remember that. You know what I'm talking about. I don't know who would sell conies in Greek food anyways, but I thought that's what I need. I need a Greek gyro. And so Dale says, move on. So disgusting hot dogs with cheap commercial chili. And it was a bad experience that I'm bitter about to this very day. I'm extremely bitter about this. And it doesn't set well with me. I've told you the story, at least I imagine I've told you the story of my wife and I and someone advertised, parents come to this event. We're giving away free merchandise, drawings of thousands of dollars worth of stuff, all this other kind of. So we thought, this is what we want to do. They were offering free training, and we went. It was this big advertising campaign for baby tend-to bed, thousands of dollars for a baby bed. And the guy that was giving the advertisement was preying on young mothers, and just like he was giving horror stories of babies that had died in horrible accidents, and twisting their emotions, and persuading people that had no money. We were there, and there were poor people everywhere, and we got baited and switched. Does that make sense? We were, it was false advertising. Some of you, if you've been to St. Louis, you go eat at Emo's Pizza. It said pizza on the sign. I think it's Emo's. It's not even pizza. It's like a crap. Jesus doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. This is so problematic, though. Jesus makes it crystal clear what he expects from his followers. He makes it crystal clear what he expects from anybody. Jesus makes it crystal clear what he expects from his followers. He expects his followers to deny themselves. You know what that means? That means that I may not want to do this, but I don't care what I want called me to do. That's what he expects his followers to do, to deny themselves. Jesus expects me to take my cross, to bear my cross. That may mean that there are times in my life when I am ashamed and embarrassed and mocked and maybe even persecuted to follow me. This is what you must do. And Jesus again, there is no bait and switch about it. He says, if you want to save your life, you must lose your life for my sake. And Jesus makes it crystal clear. There's no bait and switch. He says, you can have absolutely everything. You can be entertained, and what does it profit you to gain every bit of that stuff, but to lose your very soul? To lose your soul. He's not tricking us. He's not deceiving us. He lays it out clear in the text, but this is the fascinating part. It's like we've signed up for Christianity, but we've missed his fault. He said to everyone, Peter, disciples, the crowd included, this is what I'm calling you to. If you want to be my follower, this is what I want you to do. He's clear. I'm just not sure that we read the book before we signed. Understood what the God of the universe, who's going to come in all his glory, the Father's glory, with his holy angels, I don't think we understood. Maybe we didn't understand. I don't know. Maybe some of you understood when we signed up. He's not speaking to just Peter, and he's not speaking to disciples. He calls himself a believer. Let me ask a simple question again. Are we safe? Are we collectively safe? Are we safe? When I read these words, what comes to my mind, where we are called to testify of a glorious God who's going to come in all the Father's glory with his holy angels. We are called to testify about him. Not Peter, not only Peter, not the disciples, not only disciples, to the crowds he's, you've got to do. You want to follow me, this is what you've got to do. You've got to lose your life. You've got to lose your life. You set what you want aside, and you follow me. Are we doing what God has called us to do, or are we doing what we feel comfortable doing? Are you doing what you don't want to do, but what I believe that in the life of a believer that we should have at least this fleshly battle inside of us where my flesh says, I don't feel comfortable doing that, but where we crucify ourselves, we put aside the fleshly desires of what Philip wants to do, and I do what Jesus wants me to do. What will you give in exchange for your soul? I ask you, it's a painfully simple question. Are you ashamed? I think the last couple of weeks we saw some things. We had to celebrate recovery. Folks come. You remember they spoke. We spoke last week about some things. I want to say this again, that some of good for you, but we don't like them, or at least most of them don't like them. Give me like a Swiss cake roll, I'll down it in a second. But a plate of green beans, come on. Like, I don't care if it's good for me. Like, some of the hardest things to swallow, things like confessing our need for help, things like asking for prayer when we're struggling, things, you picture these sorts of things, like making ourselves vulnerable, like opening our mouths and telling someone how much they need Jesus in their life. Because with them, they bring shame. They bring shame. And they bring embarrassment. They bring pain. Because we make ourselves... It's a lot like being stripped down and toting a cross through town. It's embarrassing. It's the honor. We love the moral righteousness we feel as Christians. We view ourselves as being intellectually superior to everyone else because we got truth down and you don't. But we hate the stuff that's good for us. That's the stuff like making ourselves vulnerable. We hate the shame. We can't stand that kind of stuff. I can't read verses 36 and 37. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what would a man give in exchange for a soul? I cannot read that. We're thinking about money. I think about money. I think about enjoying life. He writes these words, if we should put the whole world, if we took the whole world with all of its riches, we had every bit of it here. You picture every bit. Entertainment, world's riches, what the world values. If we took every bit of that on the credit side of a ledger, and if we took a single man's soul versus a single man's soul, if we should put the whole world with all its riches on the credit side and a single man's soul on the debit side, the credit side would be practically erased. To say this statement will be readily assented to in theory, will almost discard this idea as foolish. We think that we need to enjoy this life first, and if there still be time, to prepare for the next. That is the religion of many, he writes, even of those that bear the Christian name. That is not what up for, but he spoke it to the crowds, and he said, if you want to come after me, this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like. Let me tell you that reading the text as evangelism, just reading the text as evangelism, that aspect of the Christian life, that we are called to testify of what God... Jesus says, whoever is ashamed of me and my words, listen to what he says, in this adulterous and sinful generation. It's so puzzling to me that even in the midst of brokenness, we're so hesitant to echo these words. The world is stories. I'll give you, my dad told me this week there's a kid from around here that got his ribs kicked in, his ribs broken in some kind of fight. Like people are fighting. There's adultery going on. We just talked in Sunday school class that suicide rates since, what was it, ever been? Like social media is destroying kids' lives. Farmers are committing suicide at like an all-time rate. We talked about that in Sunday school class this morning. There is brokenness and heartbreak and gross open sin and addiction. It is all around us. It's all around of Jesus Christ, our healer, our redeemer, the one that can pull us out of the pit. Who is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation? It's puzzling to think that, I don't know how to say it. We claim his name, but we don't claim his cross. There's nothing worse than that. We claim his name, we don't claim his cross. To ask ourselves, what would it look like in our own communities? Missionaries in our own neighborhoods. Christians who have lost their lives for the sake of Jesus and for the sake of his gospel. Almost the exact words from verse 35. To his church, he had a sheet of paper that was affixed in the sanctuary wall. And on the sanctuary wall, you know what they wrote on there? They wrote names of lost people. I must admit that sounds a little weird and crazy, because what would happen if someone came in and they saw their name on the wall? Because without Christ, you're lost. You have no hope. And that eternally, that people lose their soul. And people trust in things they shouldn't trust in. But if you don't accept the good news of the gospel, you don't know God. But that although it sounds, I don't know what it sounds like. There's something about it that's right. Does that make sense? Like naming people that we know that haven't trusted in Jesus Christ. There's something about it that's right. Got another buddy that went the other night, and he went